Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with another episode of GRAFFTV. Today we have graffiti royalty in the studio. He's a LA legend, a Hall of Famer, and a graffiti pioneer. One of the few writers to ever go all city. An innovator who literally wrote the book on Los Angeles graffiti history. He's a founding father and a graph historian. From the Legion of Doom, the original interstate freeway killer. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Whisk WCA. Hey man, it's great to meet you and an honor to have you here. I have so many questions for you, but let's start with your cruise. Can you give us a rundown of all the crews you're in, man?
Absolutely. Like you said, West Coast artists. That's my heart right there. That was the first crew that I was in. Then I started IFK, Interstate Freeway Killers. I started BC, Blue Crew, and I started RTD Killers. I got into OTR a long time ago. Price put me down, rest in peace. I'm in RF, Rapid Fire. I'm in KOG, Killers of Giants. In New York, I'm in AOK. I'm in LOD, one of the original members from LOD. I hope I'm not missing any.
Wow, man, that's
Yeah.
a long list of legendary LA and New York crews. Now, let's start the interview with your parents, actually. Mm-hmm. Where are they from?
My dad, he was in the Lincoln Park area. And my mom, she was like in the Little Valley area. And they met on Whittier Boulevard. They came back from a Midnighters concert. And my mom and her girlfriends were walking down Whittier Boulevard going home. And my dad and his homeboys were in their Ramfla, and they just they must have tripped out and saw my mom. He jumps out and he starts talking to her.
Nice.
And,
what type of person was your father and your mother? Can you describe the type of people they were?
My dad was, they took him from the Vadio to Vietnam.
Wow.
He was 101st Airborne Division Screaming Eagle. I learned a lot from my dad, I learned a lot from my mother as well. What can I say? They just did a great job.
Nice. Where were you born?
I was born in East LA. Yeah.
Nice. What part of East LA did you grow up in? Did you grow up in East LA?
We did. I remember growing up in East LA, but I'm definitely from the West Side.
What was East LA like in those days growing up?
I used to live right next to the local neighborhood, and I used to trip out on them and how they dressed and how they walked, and them partying with girls and stuff, and that's just how I grew up. I grew up in the Vadio, so I always understood what it was like, the LA culture. I just thought that was just like how Angelinos did it. I didn't even know that, it was like its own little sect of the world. I just thought that's just my neighborhood.
Do you have any brothers and sisters?
I do. Yep. I have 2 sisters and 2 brothers.
Are you the oldest, middle, youngest?
I'm the oldest.
Nice.
Yep.
Who are you named after? Is there a story behind that?
Yeah. I'm a junior, actually. My dad thought that, his firstborn was going to have his name, so.
Around this early time while you're growing up in East LA, what type of kid were you? Were you a troublemaker, into school?
Yeah, I went to school, and because I looked white, I always, had this idea that I was a surfer, which was different from the cholos. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was a cholo. I was a surfer. My hair was long. I wore OP shorts, lightning bolt shirts, slip-on Vans, you know, puka shell necklace, and I subscribed to Surfer magazine as a kid. But you know, when I was 10 years old, I started ditching, smoking weed.
At 10 years old, what happens for you to go that route?
It was just a natural progression of my life. It wasn't like I thought about, like, you know, I just naturally progressed to that.
At age 11, you experienced hip hop for the first time.
Yep.
Where was this? And what did you see there?
Yeah, you know, my mom used to work at Kaiser in Hollywood. So she would take us to the Boys and Girls Club, where the Home Depot is now, just not too far away from here. And at the Boys and Girls Club, I seen all these different elements of hip hop. You know, I saw people doing windmills. I saw people with black books. I saw people in ciphers, like, you know, and I'm just like, man, this is a trip. Like, these guys all have like their own little activity. And I was interested in all of it, you know, but I was really fascinated with those guys that were writing. I'm like, hey, you know, you're doing bubble letters and stuff. Like, what is that called? And they said it's called striking. I'm like, striking? Wow, that sounds pretty weird, you know. So I started striking myself, you know. At that age, I didn't really, you know, go deep into it, but I was influenced by then.
Besides that point, how old are you when you first noticed graffiti on the street?
I had to be about 13.
And what were your thoughts about it there? Do you ask your parents why are they writing on the wall?
Oh, no. It's, you know, it's just, again, to me, it was just an activity, you know. Some people that were my friends were into BMX. Some of my friends were cholos. Some of my friends were, you know, all kinds of other things, you know. I even had some friends that were in the Boy Scouts, you know. But I was into, you know, riding waves. That's what I was into, you know. So I remember when I'm like 13, 14, taking the bus to the beach, and that was my getaway, you know, riding waves, watching the sunset, you know. When I was 15, I remember walking up to the school. It was Uni High, and like, you know, I'm walking up from Santa Monica and Westgate, and it's this big ass school, you know. I'm just walking up, and I'm seeing like people doing pieces and stuff. I'm like, whoa, like I remember this stuff, you know. Like I was already writing graffiti, you know. I even started my own crew with like 5 to 7 different writers, but they were all me. You know, you know, so we were called the Mischief Bombers, you know, and I just wrote all kinds of stuff. But I didn't think I was a writer. I just thought I was just, you know, scrawling on stuff and passing time.
Do you remember some of the early names you saw on the street? Can you mention a few?
Yeah, you know, at the beach, I started writing graffiti, and I was pretty good on a boogie board, you know, and so I called myself the Shredder. You know, I'd write the Shredder. And one of my good friends, you know, the way he wrote his board, he kind of like snapped his board, you know. So I call him the Snapper. And he later became Snap from UTI, who started Skill from UTI. Well, Snap and Skill started UTI. You know, so that's how they got their start. But we were writing, like I had a friend, his name was Flex. You know, because he used to flex, you know, the way it was all about like how you rode the waves, you know. I would shred a wave, Ron would snap, you know, Bob would flex, you know, so we had all types of different names.
You're also known for the name Ink, Page, and Doer.
Yeah.
How long do those 3 names last?
Yeah, they were all Mischief Bombers, you know, so Page 1, I thought that sounded pretty cool, you know. Ink, and I stopped writing ink when I took the bus to Hollywood and I saw ink and silver, I'm like, oh, I better stop writing ink because there's like a real graffiti writer writing ink, you know? And ink and silver, they were up. Alski was up. I saw Frost and Demo from CBS. I didn't know they were from CBS. I just saw their name, Frost and Demo. I remember News from KSW. Yeah, KSW. No. Yeah, it was KSW. It was Alski, News, Day. And that's when I noticed, like, oh, these Alski, like all these guys were like writing graffiti. And then I saw Soon, you know, and Soon was like, that's real graffiti, you know. And I didn't know he was from New York. Like I didn't know about that stuff. I just thought like he was, you know, from LA writing graffiti, you know. Soon and Legit. And then I started, you know, really seeing that LA had a graffiti culture back then. I used to see, you know, Mr. 151 from Rockwood Street, you know. I seen the LA Bomb Squad, you know. I just knew that like there was a culture piece to LA and they called it graffiti.
Who first personally introduces you to graffiti? Is there someone who teaches you the unspoken rules?
No.
You just learned everything by sight, by looking, by seeing what's on the street?
By walking.
By walking.
I walked every street in LA. I mean, literally walked it from downtown to the beach.
At 13, you catch your first tag.
Mm-hmm.
Where was it, and what were you doing that day?
It had to be on the west side somewhere, you know. You know, I used to go racking a lot because I needed something that was more than a jumbo marker from the grocery store. You know, I needed a real graffiti tool. You know, so I used to like look at, you know, different stationery stores and stuff, and I saw this big marker. It was a jumbo marker, but it was called a Pilot, and it came in 4 colors. So I racked all 4 colors, you know, and I'm like, you know, just writing and writing and writing, and I found out like, fuck, these don't last that long, you know, like, oh, I maybe have to refill ink. Like, what should I refill the ink with? And then I found marsh ink, you know, and I started like taking out the mesh of the marker and just flooding it with marsh ink, T-grade ink, you know, and then started writing graffiti. Yeah. I mean, all this stuff, like, you know, I just learned through experience and through traveling, you know, like going to different beaches with boogie boarding, riding on the RTDs, like, and I remember as I started like kind of evolving into like from like boogie board graffiti or surfer graffiti to actual graffiti, I would start to see people up on the bus, and I started noticing some of the same names on the bus, you know.
In these early years, what school are you attending?
Yeah, I'm at
Junior
uni.
high.
I'm at uni. I get kicked out for graffiti. I go to Hamilton. I get kicked out for graffiti. I go to Venice. The principal of Venice says you're just too much of a distraction. You gotta leave. You know.
How were you getting caught?
I wasn't getting caught. Just people were just saying that this dude wrote on my seat, and look at my ass. I got Whisk on my ass on the RTD, like, you know. So they would, I guess. I mean, I didn't know that they were snitching on me, but yeah, I guess that's what they were doing, you know.
Speaking of the name Whisk,
Yeah.
your sister is partly responsible for your name.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about that?
You know, she was there. We're at the table. You know, we're having some lunch, and she's doing some schoolwork, and I'm like, I'm done with Doer. I'm done with Ink. I'm done with Page One. I'm actually done with the Mischief Bombers. You know, like now it's time to like actually find my name and really do something. Like really start my campaign. and she had asked me, you know, what a whisk wire was, and I wrote wire first. And I liked the way the letters connected, and then I wrote whisk. But I mean, I didn't spell it WHISK. I just spelled it WISK. You know, I'm like, that's it right there.
Do you ask your friends an opinion of your new name? Do you keep it a secret?
Yeah, I didn't have no friends to ask. Like, I was just like a very unknown, long-haired writer that looked like a surfer.
Do you remember first going out to write Whisk?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I went to uni after my first day of school, and I seen everyone, Koozie Rock from WCA, Risky from WCA. He wrote surf back then. I seen Legend from the Latin Kings, Fierce from the Latin Kings, Blitz, Crazy J. They all wrote on my school, and so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna do my little thing at school, and so I racked some paint. I climbed up on the gym, and I did my first WK, which was like, I was hoping it would come out fresh, you know, like a nice WK letter. And I was like, oh man, I got work to do. I got to make that look better. And I didn't take a picture, nothing like that. But when they kicked me out, the dean of uni, he took a Polaroid picture of it and gave it to me.
Oh, wow.
So I have it at home. My first throw up.
Once you start writing Whisk, how long does it take to get noticed?
You know, I don't know. You'd have to ask other writers. I mean, I would just walk up and down every street on the west side, you know, coming home from school, going to the beach, you know. I'm still going to the beach, you know. And I'm hanging out in Westwood. I'm writing everything. I'm writing on the Blue Bus, and that's how I started Blue Crew. And back then, Westwood was popping. I mean, you go to Westwood on any given weekend, and it was the place to be. Not Hollywood, it was Westwood, you know. And so I'm riding on Westwood Boulevard in Wilshire, and I guess Sir sees all these buses, and they're brand new buses coming down with Whisk on them, and Sir's like, you know, I guess he kind of figured like, okay, here's this guy, he's got long red hair, he's got like this army jacket on, but there's ink like all over his jacket and pants and his shoes. That has to be Whisk, it has to be. So he tugs on my green jacket and he's like, yo, are you Whisk? And I go, who are you, man? He's like, I'm Sir. I'm like, you're Sir? And man, we hit it off right there. It was, I mean, we went bombing. And that was it. I mean, that was the beginning of the whole fucking thing.
How would your friends describe a young Whisk back in those days?
You know, I can only tell you what I've heard people when they used to describe me. You know, they say long red hair. They would, you know, be fascinated with the size of my nose. Like they would always be like, he's a white dude. Or I don't know, maybe he's a Russian guy, or I don't know, like we don't know, like he's like a white dude, like a rocker, like they really couldn't peg me too much, you know, but they knew that I had ink on my clothes and my jacket and my shoes, and I was writing.
In 1985, you begin high school, uni high, I believe.
Yep.
Is this where you meet Risky?
Yep.
How does Risky influence you, and what did you learn from him?
You know, Risky was writing surf back then, but then he had just changed over to Risky. He would write Risk. You know, Vice 67 was at that school as well. He was a Latin King, and I don't know how I met him. I guess, you know, we just met, whatever, and we hooked up, and he would tell me about, like, you know, him bombing with Soon and Legit, and I was just like, you know those guys? Like, you know, those guys are like up, right? And we started writing together too, and I, you know, I guess I was like not giving a fuck. I would write anywhere, and whenever I was with him, I would write Whisk and Risk, I wasn't WCA yet, so I couldn't write that, you know, but it would be like Whisk, Risk, and we did that for a little while.
At Risky's house, you watched Style Wars for the first time.
Yep.
What effect did that movie have on you?
It's incredible. That movie, like almost every writer that's ever seen it was like, oh man, I'm inspired. You know, I want to go do graffiti. In fact, I was with Sign, rest in peace, and Skept and Risky at Risky's house, and we watched it. And I was so inspired that they all went to sleep or whatever. I'm like, I'm gonna go walk to the freeway. And so I walk to the 405, but I didn't really think nothing of it. But I was catching tags like all the way from like Risky's house to the 405 freeway, and then start bombing the 405 freeway. And I didn't even think about it. I should have known better. But the next day, Risky was like, you know, what'd you do? I'm like, what do you mean? I just went out bombing a little bit. You know, I just saw Style Wars. I'm inspired, you know? And he's like, dude, you wrote on everything from my house to the freeway. Like, my dad's pissed off, you know? But yeah, I mean, you talk to writers that saw that stuff back then, like, they're like, you know, mimicking every writer, and they can almost finish the sentence in the movies, and, you know, they're looking up to all these New York writers, you know?
Sir, RTDK, you mentioned how you first meet him. How old are you when you both meet for the first time?
I'm 15, he's 13.
Is Sir writing Sir at this time, or does he have a different name?
He's writing Sir.
How does Sir get his name? Is it short for something?
Not that I know of, you know?
Does Sir belong to a crew at this time, or is he a oner?
You know, Sir used to write with Mech, and they were writing partners, you know? But no, they didn't really have a crew. You know, I guess the first crew that Sir and I became part of was WCA. We were WCA.
Why does Sir become your closest crime partner? What made you two work so well together?
You know, he was my eyes, because I couldn't see that well, you know? He would look after me because I'm getting high. You know, I'm drinking. You couldn't ask for a better writing partner.
When would the both of you go out writing? Every day, on the weekends?
Every fucking day.
Was he going to your same school at that time?
No, because he's 2 years younger than me. So, like, you know, I would ditch sixth period and go pick him up at his school, which was Emerson, right down the way. And we would go to the bench, you know, on Fairfax and Olympic. And actually everybody went to the bench, and that's where you met all these writers. And at that time, like, graffiti was on and cracking. Like, LA graffiti was at its pinnacle, really. You know, I mean, I can't describe what it was like, and I didn't think really nothing of it, but as I reflect on it, there was literally hundreds of kids killing one bus every time it pulled up into the bus stop. I mean, you know, you got riders riding on the regular side, on the grill, on the destination, on the driver's side. You know, what I used to like doing is I used to like knocking on the door, and then when the bus driver opened the door, "Can I help you?" I go, "Yes, you can help me." And I would write right underneath. It was a perfect section right underneath the driver right there. And I remember one time a driver started crying. I was just like, "Everything's okay." Yeah, I'm just riding on your bus. That's it. And oh man, she was in tears, and she came off her bus, and her bus was killed. I wish I had a picture of it. It was demolished. I mean, like end to end, up and down. I mean, kids were just going crazy.
What kind of knowledge and skills do you and Sir share with each other?
Sir had styles forever. I mean, Sir just had styles. I mean, it just came natural to him, you know. Where I had styles too, I just felt like Sir always had natural flow with his styles.
How would you compete with each other? Would you compete with each other?
You know, we became such good friends. I think the only time I thought like where we're competing with each other was when the throw-ups start coming into fruition, you know. The throw-ups, like I just remember one time on Santa Monica and Wilshire, we were waiting for a bus. I'm not sure what time it is, but I just do a little WK on the floor. No, it's actually a W on the floor. It wasn't a WK. And I don't know what made me do it, but I just put a number 1 on it. And then there's a brown bus shelter back then right there. And I did a W on that, and I put 2. And Sir was like, "What are you doing?" "What's this? 1, 2. I'm like, "You know what? Let's start numbering our throw-ups." And he just ran with it, and we spent that whole night just writing throw-ups and stuff, and it did get competitive, you know. Like he'd go to sleep, and I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go to sleep too," and I'd go out bombing and try to get like ahead of him, and then, you know, maybe he caught me sleeping, and he went and started doing throw-ups. So, I mean, it was all fun. It was not like, you know, like competition where like we're disliking each other because of competition. No, we're like, you know, the love just continues.
Another writer, Ash, credits you for teaching him how to rack paint. What were the techniques you taught him, and who taught you?
You know, no one taught me how to rack. It was just, I called it the fun pass. You know, if you had a fun pass, you can go anywhere in the city and get everything for free. You know, and writing graffiti, you needed paint. So I would just start racking paint and stuff, you know. And if Ash credited me with racking, I don't know when I taught him. I don't know where I taught him. I mean, we had spots everywhere in the city, so I mean, I can only imagine where he could have learned it, you know.
How would you take the paint? Just stuff it in your pockets?
No. I mean, I would like put 3 cans down below and another 3 cans above, so I had like 6 cans there, and I put another 3 cans in the back. So I'd always come with like, you know, 9 cans, and that was with if I was wearing a shirt or a sweatshirt or a jacket. It didn't matter. I was always racking.
Where would you go writing to get the most recognition in those days?
It wasn't even like that. We just knew that. When I say we, it's Sir and I. Sir and I, we knew that we wanted to be an all-city team. And, you know, we just went wherever the buses took us naturally, how just things flowed. There was some times where, like, in the morning, I'd say, okay, we're going to go here. Or maybe sometime, hey, Rob, I want to go here. Or, I mean, it's just every day flowed. Every day was different. We saw different parts of the city every single day. Like, we had the best upbringing.
Did you and Sir ever get caught together? How were you caught?
No, we never got caught. We got chased a lot. You know, we used to have these RTD police that had huge hard-ons for us. That was Thompson and Hart. You know, they vowed to catch us one day, and they waited till I was 18, and they followed us around from the bench. I was with Triax. I'm with a gang of riders. One day, we were riding all over, and me and Pino from West Coast Artists, he tagged along, and he wanted to kind of like go bombing a little bit. And you know, we took a little break from the lineup, came back into the lineup, and I'm doing my same spot that I always do on the buses, and I just started seeing shadows coming. I'm like, whoa, this is weird. And I just got tackled by Thompson, and he said, "You remember me, Red?" Well, I mean, there's a lot of backstory to that. You remember me, Red? I mean, he's chased me a few different times, and he couldn't catch me. But that time, he knew he was going to catch me. He waited till I was 18 so that he could take me down to the county, and he said, "Oh, I see you have so and so's jacket on." I had this big ass RTD jacket because we used to rack them from the buses, with the one with the fur and a bunch of patches and stuff, and he's like, and he ripped it out of my body. He was like, "I'm gonna give it back to this bus driver," and I just laughed at him.
What were the penalties like for graffiti back then in those early days?
I don't know if they existed. I remember I did 3 days for that one, and that was a trip. I had long red hair, so I was classified, accordingly, and they took me to HLJJ, which I'm kind of dating myself. If you were busted in the county and going to HLJJ,
What do your parents say when they find out you've been busted for graffiti?
I don't remember.
Do you consider quitting after getting those days in jail?
No.
Have you ever been injured while out riding or almost died?
Oh yeah.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a lot of times when you're getting chased, and you're not always getting chased by the cops. You're getting chased by other neighborhoods. You're getting chased by heroes. You're getting chased by people that just, I guess, were just pissed off that they saw you riding. Getting chased by a cop was very routine in those days. So you're scaling fences and walls, and sometimes, I mean, I didn't know this, but like you're jumping off like these tremendous heights, and I didn't really catch it till I was a lot older that I needed a chiropractor. One time on the 217, I didn't have a token or my bus pass or something like that, and there was a lot of us, and we were on Wilshire and Fairfax, so I decided to get on top of the 217 bus. So I'm scaling the top of the 217 bus, and I'm kind of reaching over to like pull myself up, and there's a fan on that side of the bus that I guess I forgot was there, and I just remember going, and I'm like, whoa, and these 2 fingers right here, you can still see that injury, and oh man, I was like, oh shit. So I get on the bus, I'm like telling the bus driver, like, I gotta go to the hospital, like, and he's like, go back there, and someone like wrapped up they took off their shirt, wrapped it up, and all the like 30 riders go to Kaiser on Sunset to watch Whisk get mended up.
Have you ever had a gun pulled out on you while out riding?
Oh yeah.
Can you tell us about that first time, about that experience?
I mean, it was just routine.
Do you talk yourself out of it? Do you run away?
I used to have a trick back in those days where I'd carry a joint behind my ear, and anytime someone ran up to me, like people like, whether they were Crips, Bloods, they were from neighborhoods, whatever, and they'd like rush you, like I remember this one time that Sir and I we got off in the Pueblos in South Central, and we didn't know it was the fucking Pueblos. We don't know all Bloods and shit, And we get off the bus and we're like, okay, we're gonna go riding, and all these big ass Bloods come up to us and they're like, hey Blood, what you guys doing here? And I just pull out my joint. I'd be like, man, we're just looking for a light. And they're like, yeah, come over here. And then they'd be like, we get all lifted and stuff, and they'd be like, what are you doing out here? You're not supposed to be here. And I'm like, oh, we're writing graffiti. They're like, oh, you want to write graffiti? Like, yeah, come on. Like, show us your can. Like, give us your can. Like, we want to write graffiti too. And it was just like that everywhere, it always seemed like neighborhoods befriended us and the locals befriended us, and we'd be maybe at the bus stop in the panic zone by General Hospital, and this guy would be like, "Hey, you want to smoke a joint?" Like, "Yeah, smoke a joint." I didn't know it was angel dust, like I'm on the bus with fucking Sir. I'm like, man, that joint like hit me different. Like, yeah, man, it's just the norm, man. A kid growing up, an all-city kid growing up in LA, you just see a bunch of shit.
As you mentioned before, at some point, instead of writing Whisk, you paint a W throw up near Wilshire and Santa Monica.
Yep.
And number it with the number 1.
That's right. That's right.
What year was this, and why do you begin to number them?
I don't know what came over me. Like I said before, I wrote number 1 there. I wrote number 2 on the bus shelter, and then I just told Sir, let's just start numbering our throw-ups, and we just went all night numbering our throw-ups, and that became a thing. And we told Chase about it. We told Skept about it, and our crew BKA. If you were in BK, which is only 4 of us, you were numbering your throw-ups.
Can you name the other writers in BKA?
Yeah, Chase and Skept. Chase UCA and Skept K2S.
When you start writing the W, was there ever some concern other writers wouldn't recognize you were both Whisk and the W?
No.
The highest numbered throw up we've seen is 3,812. Mm-hmm. What number did you finally reach?
I'm in. You saw 3,812?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, I've cheated myself out of hundreds of numbers. I mean, because we were very conscious of not cheat on the numbers, that if I forgot, I'm a stoner, right? So I'm like forgetting numbers. I'm like, "Sir, what number am I on?" He's like, "I don't know." So we'd have to go back to the last known throw up of, where we went. And sometimes that would take us the whole day to get to that last spot and go, "Oh, it's this number. Okay, cool." And then we start over, based on that number. But I'm sure I cheated myself out of a gang of numbers.
Do you remember where your last throw up was?
No, I don't.
When did you first know you were making a lot of noise in the streets? Does anything happen?
Well, we defined all city to have all the streets, have all the buses, have all the freeways, any yards from Pomona to Sylmar to Venice to Long Beach. That's what we thought all city was. Come to find out that all city is just really like the metropolitan area. That's really all city, but we defined it a little bit deeper.
As you're making your mark all across the city and meeting new writers, do they come up to you and say, "Oh my God, you're getting up so much. We see you everywhere"? What's their reaction to your assault on the city?
Nah, no one reacted like that. You remember, we're all pretty much pioneering, I didn't really think that there was any hierarchy. Maybe other people would probably say something different. Maybe, my ego wasn't my amigo back then. Maybe I was, really feeling my oats. I'm pretty young still, you know what I mean? King of the city and whatever that means, So it's like, yeah, I'm sure I came off a certain way to most writers, but.
In 1987, Michael Jackson releases a music video for "The Way You Make Me Feel."
Was that in 87?
At the 1-minute mark, he dances next to a wooden pole that reads "Whisk."
Yeah.
Was that your tag?
No, Risky did it for me. Yeah.
Did he do it specifically for the video, or did it just happen to film the video there?
Yeah, it was a prop. It was a set. And Risky got the gig, I guess, and he wrote all of our names, but mine just caught some fame. I think I'm also in another Michael Jackson video, too. Yeah.
Do you know which one?
I I don't, but I remember seeing it and going, wow, 2 videos in a row.
How do you find out about the first Michael Jackson video? Does Risky tell you? Do you first see it on the TV?
No one told me. I think it was like on Yo MTV Raps or some shit, and I don't know. I just saw it on MTV.
Was there a reaction from your fellow writers seeing you? Any news get back to you?
Nope.
During the height of your graffiti career, bombing was your top priority before friends, before partying, even before relationships. What drove you to stay so dedicated and push yourself so hard?
I just told myself I wasn't up.
While you and Sir are out assaulting Los Angeles, we hear dozens of writers would meet in front of the Carl's Jr. on Fairfax and Olympic. As you mentioned, it was called the Writer's Bench.
Yeah.
How did the Writer Bench start, and who starts it?
Yeah, WCA does. You know, Rival, rest in peace, Pyro, PJ, Minor, Rack, Said, rest in peace. They all like would just go to Carl's Jr. from Fairfax High School because they all went to Fairfax, and they could just go to Carl's Jr. to, like, I don't know, bullshit or whatever, maybe talk some shop, I don't know. But we got wind of it and we started heading there, and then other writers started hearing about it, and they would start coming from all over the city. I remember seeing writers from LA High, from Roosevelt, from you know, even down Dorsey, like all writers from everywhere. You know, San Fernando, like it really was the Writer's Bench.
What year was this? Can you pinpoint?
I mean, I was still in school, so it's like 85, 86.
What exactly would happen there? Why was the Writer's Bench so important and influential?
You know, I think that LA always wanted a place where all writers could meet up. You know, I think that was influenced by Style Wars probably too. You know, like there was a bench at Style Wars, so it's like, well, we want to meet up, I guess, too. Like, we didn't have subways back then, you know, we had the buses. So like, you know, it was natural to meet at a spot where we can kill buses and bullshit.
How would you and other writers work together to mob the buses there?
I don't think there was any organization like that. It was just writers doing their thing.
How long does the Writer's Bench last?
It didn't seem like it lasted long. And Triax, you know, OTR, RTD Killer, Triax, he would always create different benches all over the city, but none ever got to the pinnacle of the Fairfax and Olympic bus bench.
Was smoking weed and doing drugs part of graffiti in these times?
No, it was just part of my day.
Was weed the most common drug back then? What else were people doing?
I don't know. I was just doing weed and alcohol.
From the Writer's Bench, RTD buses come into play. Were RTD buses being bombed already when you started writing?
Yeah, they were writing. Yeah, Alski, I remember seeing Alski up a lot. That's why when I started RTD Killers, I made sure that he was the RTD Killer. You know, Minor would rock buses. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, even fools from neighborhoods and stuff were carving it on the glass or the plexiglass or whatnot, or etching their name into different parts of the buses. And you know, it was just a place where you could just, you know, mark your name, and it was traveling everywhere. Now you have freight trains that do that.
What tools would writers use to write on buses back then?
I used to love a flooded, homemade roll-on, you know, and we made our own markers back then. Sometimes we made our own ink too, you know. Tane, rest in peace, from WCA taught us how to make our own ink.
Do you know who first starts using sandpaper for those giant window scribes?
Oh yeah, an RTD Killer. His name was Kino.
Where were the best spots for bus mobbing, and what made them the best?
Every spot was the best spot, you know. Sir and I loved Wilshire and Westwood. We used to love the Wilshire line. You know, that was our favorite line. You know, maybe some people loved the Venice line. Maybe some people like Soto. Maybe some. I mean, all RTD killers from RTD killers are all the Hall of Fame riders, and most of them were like the leaders of their own crews. I mean, you should see that roll call.
As you mentioned before as well, one day on San Vicente, you and some other riders found an empty bus parked, and you completely murdered it with tags. Mm-hmm. When the driver came back and found her bus, you helped her buff her windshield. Can you tell us what happened?
I don't remember buffing anything, you know.
Another callback. Who were the TPD and the ghost unit?
The RT police?
Reset.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Yes, the RTD police.
Yeah, the RTD police, you know, Thompson and Hart, they needed to do something, so they organized this, I guess, this ghost squad. We never called them ghost squad. We used to call them UCs. Like, you know, we first saw the UCs at the bench, and I remember first meeting Thompson, and I made fun of him in front of everybody, and man, he really hated me for that.
What did you say to him? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, look at you. You're wearing your flannel. Look at your shoes. I was telling other riders. You can always tell UC by his shoes. Look at his shoes.
Where does he confront you for you to say that to him?
At the bench. Mm. Yeah.
He knew who you were already.
He didn't confront me. He was trying to stay incognito. Like he was trying to pretend like he wasn't a cop. But I can see in his eyes that he was fucking pissed at me. Yeah. And I remember seeing his partner, Hart, you know.
Would you say the ghost unit started because of your RTD killing?
I think the RT police probably would say that. We never thought anything of it. They were just elements that, like all other elements in LA, that we had to overcome.
Do you recall some of the first riders that got caught up by the RTD police?
No. I just remember hearing stories of different RTD police. They all had their own little nicknames. You can ask other riders about it. I kind of felt like those guys were Mickey Mouse cops, you know, and they really meant to like hurt riders and stuff. And most of these riders were under 18, so to me, they're, you know, not my favorite people.
How did bus mobbing change through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s?
Yeah, you know, I think that through their efforts, they were starting to catch riders up. And remember, like, you know, the golden age was like from 83 to 88, you know? And there was a different era of graffiti from 89 to 94. You know, 89, you had the introduction of Chaka. You also had the international graffiti vocabulary word, the heavens, coined. So freeway signs were getting killed. And then we went into the dark ages right there with tag banging and Fox Undercover and all that bullshit.
How and when did bus mobbing end, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think when that era changed in 89, the golden age and the era changed.
Rest in peace to bus mobbing, a dead art form in LA graffiti history. Now, moving ahead, at some point, you and Sir discussed going all city. Is that a term used in those days, all city?
Oh yeah, and that's something we learned from New York writers. You know, they were always talking about that was their goal, you know, to be all city. You know, like I said before, Sir and I defined all city in a very different way.
What does it mean to go all city? How would you define it?
From having all the buses, having all the freeways, having all the streets, having like ink tags on the streets, paint tags, throw ups, having pieces in the yards, everywhere from Pomona to Sylmar to Venice to Long Beach.
Wow.
It took us 3 years to be all city.
Do you and Sir make a plan to accomplish this feat? Or do you just...
Yeah, it's not that organized, but it's just like, you know, if we go bombing every day and we go everywhere and do what we gotta do, eventually we're gonna get there, and eventually we did get there.
Would you map out the areas? What was your strategy in general?
Yeah, sometimes we map it out, sometimes we just let the buses take us where we needed to go. You know, like if it was on a Saturday, like we have no school, right? That was a long day. A Saturday or Sunday was a long day. You know, it's like we were from the west side, so we had to like take it from the west side to downtown to really kind of branch out to go wherever we needed to go, you know, and we're looking we spent typically the day racking up all of our materials and like using our fund pass for everything. And, you know, eat. Like, the only thing that really cost money back then for me was, like, weed, you know. Like, I couldn't rack weed. I had to buy the shit, you know. So I'd sell paint. I'd sell markers, whatever, at school. So, and then at night, you know, I'd get, you know, high, drunk, whatever. And then we just start going bombing all the way until, you know, the night owl service started happening. So sometimes, like, you know, we might be 5 miles from a night owl service. We might be 10 miles from a night owl service. We'd have to walk all the way to a night owl service to get whatever connector we needed to get back to the west side.
Wow. What dangers and obstacles did you face while going all city?
Oh, you have, you know, crack was like, you know, big back then. So you had like a lot of crackheads. You had a lot of gangsters, you know, you had a lot of territorial elements, you know, out where you had a lot of, you know, even, you know, all the different vices out there. And, you know, you had all the different cops that kind of were in those different vices. And, you know, you had, you know, gang units, you had vice units, you had, you know, regular units, like, you know, you had helicopters, you know, then you just had people that would just, you know, I had long red hair, you know, so sometimes people would be like, you know, howling at me and shit. I'd be like, I'm a dude, you know, like, what's wrong with you, man, you know? But we always had something for that ass that they try to get live with us. And, you know, we got chased a lot.
You mentioned it took you 3 years to go all city. Mm-hmm. After those 3 years, why were you satisfied and able to say you were all city? What cemented that in your mind?
I don't think we ever thought anything of it. We just kept on going until they called us all city, you know?
Were you and Sir the first writers to go all city in Los Angeles?
No, I mean, the way that we did all city, we said yeah. But there was all city. I mean, Minor was all city back then. You know, you could even say Soon was all city because, you know, he was going everywhere. But like the way me and Sir defined it, we just wanted to make sure that there was no doubt in anyone's fucking mind that we were all city.
Before you and Sir go all city, you've mentioned Minor was king. Mm-hmm. What made him king in your eyes?
He was dope, man. I love Dave. You know, he had buses, he had freeways. You know, he had streets, and he can paint. He was a king.
There's only been a handful of writers to go all city.
Yeah.
Or that everyone agrees have gone all city.
Yep.
Can you name all the writers who have gone all city in your opinion?
I mean, in my opinion, I think that's a disclaimer that needs to be said. And, you know, I mean, there's writers that say they're all city, and I would write SM in front of their all city. And that would spell out small city, you know. But all city writers, you know, you had Minor, you had Whisk, you had Sir, you had Euler, you had Hale. I felt like we were the all city writers that really did it the way it was supposed to be done.
You got to see every part of Los Angeles during your all city journey. Mm-hmm. How do you think growing up on one side of town versus another affects a writer?
Just their environment. I mean, that's all it really is. Just you just come from a different part of the city.
Could you have reached all city status without a writing partner like Sir?
I'm sure you could. Yeah. I just chose to do it with a writing partner.
At this time, you're tagging on buses, killing the streets, going all city. But a new spot enters the graffiti realm, heavens.
Yeah.
You and Sir are credited for coining that term. Can you talk about the first time the both of you go up a freeway sign and mention the word heaven?
Yep, I can. And it's in the book, The History of Los Angeles Graffiti Art. But, you know, everyone should know this, that Sir did 5 heavens before he even fucking told me there was this new spot, this secret weapon called a heaven. You know, you had IFK just like really coming out strong, but you had other writers that were killing the freeways too. They were called freeway bombers, you know, FB. And those guys killed it too.
Do you remember some of the writers in FB?
Oh, of course I do. Yeah, Anks, Tempt, Key, Cab. I'm sure there was others, but those guys are the ones really making the noise. And Sir wanted to make sure that the whole city knew who the interstate freeway killers were. So he had this secret weapon, and he did 5 of them before he even showed me one.
Was Sir the first writer to ever catch those freeway signs, would you say?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Without a doubt.
Can you tell us the story how the term comes about?
Yep. So we're walking on the expressway from Alameda, that goes from Alameda all the way down through Big Hazard and all the way to Almonte, really. I mean, it goes far. And so we're walking in the first leg of the expressway, right where the LAPD parks their helicopters. And we're walking on it, and it's kind of elevated now. And me and Sir are walking, and he's like, I got this new spot. I'm like thinking, we've done all this shit before, you know? And then all of a sudden he starts scaling this freeway sign. I'm like, where are you going, man? He's like, what, like, where are you going the other side of the freeway? Like you're scaling, like, is this a bridge now? He's like, no, come on. And so we're like, it's a Saturday night. And remember, you know, back then, you know, Westwood was hopping, but Hollywood was also hopping too. So everyone would come in their Suzuki Jeeps and you know, bumping music. And it was that freeway was loud. It was crazy. And we're on this freeway, and I mean, we didn't plan it. It was a full moon that night. You know, it was late at night. We're rocking the heavens. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, like, the freeway got really quiet. And I remember just like looking up at the full moon, the sky, and I said, Sir, man, it's like heaven up here. And that's what he said he was gonna call his spot, the heavens.
Wow, graffiti history. In your opinion, is a heaven a freeway sign, or are billboards also considered heavens?
That's a great question. You know, people have defined it in different ways. You know, I think that anytime you're really up high and you can see it from the freeway, it's a heaven to me.
Graffiti writers have their own language. Words like heavens, bombing, racking, landmarks, and toys. Where do these terms originate from? Have you been able to trace their origins?
I think some of them come from New York writers.
Now, I'd like to talk about some of the well-known crews you're associated with. Okay. For beginners, WCA.
Yep.
How do you first join that crew, and who recruits you?
You know, I was riding with Risky a lot. One day Risky said, I'm going to pick you up around 6 in the morning. And I said, okay, you know. And so he picks me up 6 in the morning, and he's like, are you ready? And I go, yeah. Ready for what? I don't know, but let's go, you know. And we go to Belmont. And I'll never forget that. And I'm like, I said, oh man, we're walking down the driveway there. And I see all my homeboys from Rockwood like just kicking it right there. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, what's going on here? And it's like, we're gonna battle K2S. And I'm like, WCA is gonna battle K2S? Wow. I remember just tripping out on that, and we all assembled on the bottom on the big long wall, and K2S had the driveway wall there. And I remember Tane, he started asking everybody, okay, you got can control? And someone would say, yeah, okay, you're painting. You got can control? Yeah, you're painting. I remember he came up to me and he goes, you have can control? And I go, what's that? He's like, you're not painting. But that was so dope, man. I remember, I think that was the beginning of where I thought I was from WCA. Not officially, but I mean, I was pretty down with WCA. And Rival put me down in WCA inside his house, in his room, and that day, he was filling his oats and stuff, and he called everybody. He's like, "Yo, you're out!" Like, he kicked everybody out. WCA. He's like, "It's just me and you now, Whisk. We're WCA." I knew that he was on one. I knew that those guys weren't out of WCA. Like, how do you kick out legends from WCA? But that's how I got down. Rival, rest in peace.
WCA, a legendary crew. What does WCA stand for?
West Coast artists.
Do you know the history of WCA and who created it?
Absolutely. Minor, PJ, rest in peace, and Rival, rest in peace. They all had names back then called the isms. You had Daveism, Payism, and Nateism, probably, yeah. So they started WCA.
Soon, who is one of the early writers in Los Angeles history, mentions WCA got its letters from a throw-up he did for West Coast Auto Body. Is that story true? Can you confirm this rumor?
Anything Soon says is gonna be the law. You know what I mean? That's my dude right there. If he said that, then it must be true.
Can you name a few of the other writers that were in WCA at that time?
The original crew members were Rival, Minor, and PJ. And then you had, Rack, Sed, Design 9. You had Pyro. You had Tane. You had Koozie Rock. You had Vice 67. You had Styly 3. All these writers were, WCA. We came way later.
Graffiti in the 80s was a very different scene than today. What were the battles like in those days? What were the rules of the battles? And how was the winner determined?
They all had different rules. I think the rules, I didn't really hear the rules at the WCA K2S battle. WCA, K2S said WCA won, and WCA said that K2S won. So, I think that's just a sign that two legendary crews gave each other that respect, And, when BC battled MAK, I was there. We set the rules, I wasn't going to paint that day. I was going to have Ash, Sir, Doom, Kex, basically do everything against MAK. And the rules were, how big is your production? That's why we took the biggest wall. How sick were your letters? How sick were your characters? And then, how'd you all tie it into the theme of everything, Taking
a step back to the WCA and K2S battle.
Yeah.
Who were some of the writers in K2S involved in that battle?
Yeah, you had Deffer, you had Prime, that I remember painting.
Was Flame K2S part of that battle?
Flame? Flame is WCA.
Oh, Flame is WCA?
Yeah, but he doesn't like to be called Flame. He likes to be called Mr. Cartoon.
Mr. Cartoon, a huge figure in Los Angeles tattoo art. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about what type of person he was in those early days when he was Flame WCA?
Yeah, he was cool, man. Still is cool. I remember Pyro, kind of, teaching him a little bit about tattooing and stuff, and he just got immersed into it. I remember even Mr. Cartoon saying, Whisk, if you ever get a tattoo, I was never going to get a tattoo, by the way, but because I was told, if you want to stay alive, you want to stay out of jail, never bald your head and don't get a tattoo. So I just, never got a tattoo. But if I was going to get a tattoo, I have one coming from Mr. Cartoon.
Would Flame or Mr. Cartoon get up back then, or was he more of a artist?
Yeah, he'd get up, He wrote, he had the sickest letters, he had the sickest characters. Like, he was able to tie into West Coast artists' style and themes. West Coast artists had their own style, K2S had their own style. Influenced, two parts of the one city.
Speaking of battles, would you happen to know what was the first graffiti battle in Los Angeles?
I don't know. But the first one that I knew of was WCA and K2S.
It said that Shandu versus Graff was the first battle. Would you agree with that?
Well, only because of both of their interviews in the history of Los Angeles graffiti art. Again, all the stories that you hear cross-reference each other, and that's what makes it history.
Would you know who won that battle?
I don't know that.
Another famous battle, Hex versus Slick. Were you there for that one? Can you talk about it?
I wasn't there.
Was that before your time, after your time?
Oh, it was way after my time. It was Slick had just gotten to LA. Really, really talented artists.
It sounds like these early battles took place in yards,
Yeah.
right? With both crews there attending. As a historian, when do battles begin to change and it becomes about taking it to the streets and trying to get more spots than the other person?
Yeah, I think when the era changed from 89 to 94 and we slipped into the dark ages, I think that's when you saw like it going to the streets and seeing, volume versus quality. Yeah.
Another legendary crew of yours, RTDK. When do you start this crew? Do you remember?
I do. Yeah, I started in 86. It was on the number 4 line, Santa Monica. And it was pretty much between like Virgil and Highland, I think. And it's Triax, me, Sir, Price, rest in peace, and Mech. And I don't know where we're going, but Trax, I knew he had racked this sick-ass blue, Sakura. And I said, hey, Francisco, let me check out your marker. And I wrote on the top, all of our names, Whisk, Sir, Triax, Price, Mech, and then I wrote RTD Killers. And they're like, what's that? I said, that's what we are. And that's when the crew got started.
What does RTDK stand for?
RTD Killers.
Rapid Transit Killers?
RTD.
Just RTD Killers.
Killers.
Beautiful. How would you recruit new writers?
We never recruited new writers. Their work got them into RTD Killers. RTD Killers is like the Hall of Fame of bus riders, So the RTDs told us who were RTD Killers. We didn't tell them. We knew, and then whenever I ran into them, I said, hey, man, you're an RTDK. And I guess they felt honored. Yeah, I mean, it's just what you did. It's because of your work. It's not because, we're putting you down in our crew because we want to be big and badass. No, like, you earned it.
Would RTD have regular meetings in these days?
Yeah, we had meetings. I'd organize meetings, and And sometimes, like, you know, sometimes these riders would be like from different areas and different crews, and they'd have beef, and they'd be able to squash that beef. They'd come to me and say, "Hey, I got personal beef with this dude. Can you, you know, kind of referee these fights and stuff?" And sometimes I'd have to be the referee.
At some point, the bus system, RTD, changes its name to Metro Transit Authority, or MTA, and a new graffiti crew pops up with those same MTA letters.
Yeah.
What was RTD's initial thoughts on this new crew also being named after buses?
Yeah, you know, Skate, rest in peace. He was dating Blossom back then, and she was from RTDM. There was another crew called RTD Mob, I think they were called. And we battled them. And RTD, Big Lou from RTD Mob said, "Hey man, we want to battle you guys." And it's like, all right, I'm going to dispatch 3 of our guys against your whole crew. And it was Euler, Decline, and Sega that took out all those guys. And I think, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 days. And
Wow.
so, you know, the contest was like, whoever wins, the other crew has to stop writing their name, because, you know, like, how are you going to, you know, keep going as RTDM or RTDK, you know? And after that smashdown, Skate had a great idea. I respected him for it. He said, "Hey, Whisk, you know, since RTDM can't write their name anymore, what if we unite both crews and we'll call it MTA?" And I said, "Skate, I love you, but fuck that. It's always RTD Killers." Yeah. Now, when MTA started their own crew, they did the work to be its own crew. And it wasn't about bus mobbing. It was about really taking over the city. And one of my favorite acronyms that they use is "must take all." I love that.
Definitely another legendary crew. When Metro Transit takes over the bus system, is this when they start cracking down on graffiti bus crimes and charging artists with felonies?
No, they started that when it was still RTD.
In your opinion, how has RTDK managed to remain relevant for so long?
If you killed the bus, you were relevant, you know? And your work made you relevant. There was guys that all they killed was the new subways, you know, but they were up on buses, but they got bored of buses, I don't know, and they start killing the subway, and those dudes are RTD killers too.
A few years back, you had an RTDK reunion. Can you talk about that?
Oh, I've had several of them.
Who were some of the writers that show up to those reunions? Can you name a few?
It's the who's who of RTD killers, and they have their own crews, you know. There's just, the list is too long to name here, you know. When I was busted, Sleaze, rest in peace, had kind of the keys to the car, and he got some riders in and stuff, but it was all based on what he saw in the efforts of those killers, you know. And I came out, and you know, I mean, we're talking like we started that crew in '86, you know. So like a lot of, like, you know, Bruno, who was an RTD killer, he started coming up in a leadership role. You know, Drew, who was an RTD killer, he started coming up in a leadership role. You know, Tess, rest in peace, you know, he always wanted to organize stuff. 125, Euler. You had this little nucleus that organized it, that wanted to see the homies, that want to see the killers. So they'd be like, "Yo, Wiz, we're gonna have a meeting." And it's like, okay, cool. Some I made, some I didn't make, you know.
Another legendary crew you created is IFK. What does IFK stand for?
Interstate Freeway Killers.
Do you remember first creating that crew?
I do.
Can you tell us how that comes about?
It's a funny story. You know, it was originally going to be called the Frankenstein Kids. I don't know, man. I must have been hella fucking stoned that day, but I was just kind of just doodling and stuff, and I wrote the Frankenstein Kids because we were monsters, you know. So it's like the TFK. And I'm like, that doesn't look good. So I put that line, IFK. Oh, Interstate Freeway Killers. It like totally worked.
Wow.
Find it.
What year is this?
This is also 86.
Nice.
And it's also keeping up with the Killers theme, you know. RTD Killers started in for the buses, and so it was just perfect to be international, you know, Interstate Freeway Killers.
Do you remember
year.
first? Do you remember first hitting up IFK?
No.
Who were in that first wave of IFK recruits or members?
It was me, Sir. Minor was automatically in, you know, because I seen him write Freeways first, you know. So it was pretty much us three, and then you know, Ash was an Interstate Freeway Killer. Doom was an Interstate Freeway Killer. Man, I got the whole list. It's somewhere, but yeah.
One of the legendary members of IFK is GK.
Yeah.
Do you remember first meeting him, and what had you heard of him and his
Yeah.
reputation?
So GK, Jin, Uzi, those dudes, they made themselves Interstate Freeway Killers. All I had to do is just say, hey, your work speaks for itself. You're in IFK. You know, Tulse, Euler, they were IFK. Tulse, rest in peace. I think we were the nucleus. You know, we used to have our meetings on the freeway. That's where the meeting was supposed to be. You know?
How on the freeway? Can you explain that?
Sure. We used to have this spot called the Boxing Ring. It's where the old Angeles Brewery is, off the 5 freeway, and like between Broadway and Mission. There's a building right by that Angeles Brewery, and it looked like a boxing ring. And you know, we climb all the way up, and then we walk across this bridge, and then we climb on top of this building, and it was just a perfect setting. You see, like, you know, Dodger Stadium, the train yards, like General Hospital. Like, it was just a great background, you know, backdrop. And that's where we have IFK meetings, and that's where we would put new members too.
Do you ever go riding with GK in these days?
You know, whenever he comes out from Philly, like, you know, we hang out. Going bombing? No, like, you know.
You mentioned another legendary name, Tulse, STP IFK. Can you tell us about when you first meet him, and what type of person was he?
Yeah, he was a kind killer. You know, I met him back then. He was RTD Killer, you know. He was totally an IFK member. And you know, we all had our side hustles, and we'd all do it together as well.
What was Tulsa's reputation like on the street?
Killer. You know.
Unfortunately, Tulsa does pass away, but he's left a huge legacy in Los Angeles.
Absolutely.
How would you like him to be remembered?
As someone that was very passionate about doing graffiti, and there's only one word to describe someone that's very passionate, and that's killer. He's a killer.
Do you remember hearing the news Tulsa had passed away?
Yeah, I just seen him the day before.
Wow, what were you guys up to?
We saw each other in the projects, and we were just talking shop and stuff, and you know, he drove away, and next day he got killed.
Who tells you he passes away, and what's your reaction to it?
They all hurt. You know, I don't remember how, but they all hurt. All my killers live in infamy.
Another legendary figure, as you mentioned before, is Sleaze, IFK.
Yeah, Sleaze is original IFK.
Do you remember first seeing him up or someone mentioning him?
Yeah, he had long blonde hair. He went to school by the neighborhood, and he was riding a lot back then, and we'd go riding a lot back then. We'd go racking a lot back then, and we walked the freeways. He was a killer. So he was RTD killer and IFK killer.
When you met Sleaze, did he have that name already?
He did.
Do you know the story of how he got that name?
I think it's more of a private story.
Did Sleaze begin writing before Chaka?
Yes.
Would you know?
Mm-hmm.
Sleaze, also, he just recently passed away, maybe about a year ago, maybe even less.
Rest in peace.
Do you remember hearing the news that he had passed away?
Yeah, I do. They all hurt. Yep. Chaka was IFK too, I remember first meeting him on, I think it was like on Hill Street, and he was with Skept, and I don't know, I was walking downtown or something, and Skept's like, yo, Whisk, and I met this small dude, and that was Chaka. I remember, showing him like how to use a tip, and he practiced that, and obviously he's perfected it now.
Chaka knew who you were already?
Oh yeah.
Does IFK have meetings back in these days?
Many meetings, mostly on the freeway.
Oh, you're right. You mentioned that. My apologies.
Yep.
Does IFK still recruit writers, or is it closed?
We don't recruit anything. Their work tells us that they're in.
So it is still an open crew?
It's still a crew that accepts the work of the Sons of Los Angeles.
Do other writers have rank in IFK to let new members in?
We all kind of just acknowledge that the work speaks for itself. Again, we don't put in members, they put themselves in.
You've been very prolific in creating these legendary crews that just continue on throughout the years. There's a third crew called BC Crew.
Yep.
How did BC start? Can you please walk us through that as well?
Sure, that goes back to our surfer roots, mine. So when I got kicked out of Venice High, I had to go to the continuation school behind Venice. It was called Phoenix. And I met a guy there. His name was Jeff. And I remember I had a can. I guess I took a can to school. And I wrote Boe, B-O-E, Dye, D-Y-E, and Blue. And I told him right there, I'll be Boe, you be Dye, and we'll be the Blue Crew. And that's how Blue Crew started.
Nice. Who were some of the first writers in that crew? Can you give us a little roll call?
Sure. Whisk, Dye, Sir, Bay, Kex, St. Patrick, Deke. I think we were kind of the nucleus back then. And then we started recruiting other mutual friends. We like to call them heads. Doom was an original BC. In fact, he was the bureau chief. Yep.
Can you give us a timeline as to which crews come first? RTD, IFK, and BC. Which comes first, which comes second, which comes third?
You actually had it the first time you said it.
Thank you. BC is also known for a battle with MAK, as you mentioned before.
That's
Can
right.
you tell us more about that battle?
Yeah. My friends from the neighborhood, the Neo and Mondo, they were just kind of kidding around that BC was just more of like a kickback kind of crew, kind of like LOD back then. And I said, no, we're pretty good, man. In fact, we should battle. And I said, you know what? If we win, you give me 100 cans, and if you guys win, we'll give you 100 cans. And it was kind of like a running joke, but we were down for it, and we did it. It was a great day. I really enjoyed that day.
Who wins that battle?
I think we won. So.
Do you get the 100 cans?
No.
What happens? Do you mention the cans at the end of the battle?
I don't think I did. I think it was just a fun. Everyone had fun, and you know, I really like what their production and how they tied in everything. I think that they won that category. Their letters, you know, tied into their characters tied into the whole overall theme. They did a great production.
Can you name some of the few MAK members?
Yeah, Mondo, Neo. I think Key was there. They had a lot of different guys there.
You appeared in numerous news and radio shows in the 80s and in a documentary called Bombing Los Angeles. Why did you make so many media appearances, and why didn't you cover your face?
I didn't give a fuck.
Why did you feel it was important to educate the public on graffiti?
I really didn't think I was doing it to educate the public. I was just kind of having fun, and in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have done any of it, but I didn't give a fuck.
Why do you say in retrospect you shouldn't have done any of it?
Yeah, because I think graffiti writers should, you know, stay anonymous. I think graffiti writers should be, and graffiti writing should be, you know, just kind of done where it's only us. You know, we're not really letting anyone kind of in, you know, but I mean, we're in 2022, so yeah, I don't mind doing an interview.
How does the opportunity to be featured in Bombing LA, the documentary, come about?
Gary Glazier, dude from Michigan.
How does he find you?
I don't remember.
What year did this documentary take place?
I want to say 89.
Can you name some of the other writers who participated in the documentary?
WCA, KSN, K2S. There's a couple of folks from CBS. A couple of guys from the Valley. I mean, it was pretty much the who's who of whoever was doing it back then. Yeah.
In Bombing LA, you attend Spray Can 88. What was Spray Can 88?
I think that was like a function from Frame that he put together. He invited Jim Prigoff, rest in peace, to kind of document it. It was kind of just like a writer's bench where we can paint. Yeah.
Where did this take place?
You know, somewhere, some art center.
Did writers come from all over Los Angeles? Or were there from out-of-state writers, from New York?
You know, I remember mostly LA writers, but I think there was a few different guests from like the Bay Area or some other place in the U.S.
What came out of this event? Did any crews battle?
No, we just kind of got together and hung out.
In Bombing LA, a celebrity is seen greeting you, David Arquette.
Yeah.
Was he writing at this time? Did he ever write?
Yeah, that's my homeboy Sam from KGB.
Would he get up? What would you say was...
All KGB got up. They were sick. I love that crew.
Can you name a few other writers from KGB at that time?
Yeah, Scan. He was an RTD killer, but he was also KGB. Some. Man, there was 4 or 5 others that were just really one of my favorite crews of KGB.
What did KGB stand for?
Kids Gone Bad.
After the Bombing LA documentary premieres, what's everyone's reaction to you? Does it increase your fame? Did you get any feedback?
I don't remember.
Was the documentary shown on television, or where was it shown before YouTube?
I think it was shown on a public television station, like a PBS or something like that. But, you know, Tom Likas reached out to us. I guess it got pretty big that even Tom Likas would reach out to us. So Gary Glazier, myself, and the Phantom, we call him the Shadow Man, but we did not 1 but 2 interviews on KFI, which were hysterical.
Why 2 interviews?
Because they called us back, because I guess the public loved it so much. Yeah, that was good times.
At the end of the Bombing LA documentary, it says you stopped writing, became a father, and converted to Islam. Why did you stop writing?
You know, that's a personal story, but yeah, it was just a different era that was coming to pass for me.
Did your kids ever become involved in graffiti?
I mean, to my knowledge, yes. You know, I don't know how far they've taken it, but all my kids are very talented.
Are you still practicing Islam?
No, but I understand all the cultures and respect all the cultures and the truth in all the books and the truth in whatever anyone believes in to be good for them and good for their soul.
When you stop writing, how do you stay involved in the graffiti culture? Do you stay involved or you totally?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different direction now. You know, now I'm more of a custodian. I feel like there's a huge responsibility to document the history of Los Angeles graffiti art. And so with my publishing partner, Relax, we set out to do so.
As you bow out of graffiti, a new generation takes it up. But things get dark and graffiti transition into the tag banging era. How do you define this tag banging era? And what made writers and crews tag bangers?
Yeah, that's a good question for someone that was involved in that. I do define that as the Dark Ages, but then you had the Renaissance and Euler and Decline and Tulse taking us out of those Dark Ages, and really you've seen that resurgence of real graffiti coming, and you know, Euler brought me back. I did another tour with him, and we killed it. RTD Killers, IFK, yeah.
Would the older generation of writers talk about the tag banging era? What were their thoughts on it?
No one really talked about it.
As a historian, when did Los Angeles graffiti make it out of the tag banging dark ages?
In '94. Yep.
In your book, which we'll cover later, you named the years following the tag banging era the Air days. Who was Air? Can you tell us about him?
Yes. Air was someone I've never met. I would have loved to put him in IFK, but I just never met him.
Do you remember first hearing about Air, and what were your thoughts on his work?
I never heard of him. I saw him. I saw his work. His work speaks for himself. Yeah, he was a man that was ahead of his time. Rest in peace, Air.
How would you say he changed graffiti forever?
You know, the way he did his spots and the multiple colors in his pieces. He's a daredevil interstate freeway killer that was in KOG and LTS.
Can you name a few of the other writers who helped transition from the tag banging era to the new Air era, as you call it in your book?
Well, I say the Renaissance.
The Renaissance.
Yeah, the Renaissance took us out of the Dark Ages, and that was Euler and Decline and Tulse. But then, you know, as you get into the 2000s, and I mean, there was writers that were writing in the late 90s, you know, and they were starting to make their mark in LA history, and that's something that we cover. And I mean, Air was really, you know, the forefront of all that, but you had a lot of good friends of his also doing the same thing, you know, Revoke, Saber, those guys were, you know, Zest, those guys were killers.
Right. On the same note, a new crew called LTS begins to make waves.
Not a new crew.
Not a new crew?
Not a new crew. LTS has been around for a very long time. It was started by Sane, who I went to school with at uni. Yeah, so that's how long I've known him. And he started KOG. So KOG was, you know, just a brother crew of LTS. And, you know, oh, they go way back, man. They're not new.
New recruits of LTS, this new era of LTS, starts using paint in their throw-ups. They start using rollers, breaking some of the traditional rules of graffiti.
Yeah.
They also bend.
Go ahead.
They also bend letters in this new type of style. What was the older writers' reaction to this new crew? Do you recall? Not new crew, but
style.
New style.
Yeah.
Rollers, paint.
Yeah, it's just the evolution of graffiti. No one had an opinion of it. Those guys were just doing their thing, you know?
Now, in 2005, you and Relax do something no one else had done before. You put this into the world. What is this?
Oh, wow. The history of Los Angeles graffiti art.
What makes this book different from all other graffiti books?
Nice, dude. You have a... oh, you got our tags, too. Very cool. DJ Riff, nice.
What makes this book different from all other graffiti books?
Oh, it's never been done before, you know. When we set out to do this book, this is so dope. I love this. We set out to cover, we were going to do 8 books. The first 4 books were on the eras. And then whatever we missed or maybe we didn't cover, we can certainly cross-reference it into the areas. So the eras, volume 1 was 83 to 88, right? Then you had 89 to 94, which is volume 2. And then volume 3 would take us to the 2000s, and then volume 4 would be past the 2000s. And if we didn't cover anyone, or if we missed someone, or, you know, a lot of writers were like, well, you didn't mention this guy, this guy, this guy. Like, it wasn't up to us to mention them. It was up to us just to, you know, find who we can and break open those tombs and uncover all that dust and get people to talk about 83 to 88. And we found enough people, obviously, to do this big-ass book, you know? Yeah, look at this. Look how big it is, you know? And we self-published it. You know, we have our own ISBN number, and we put our own money into it. And I mean, you talk about the sons of and the custodians of LA graffiti writers that put this together. And we thought that, you know, out of all the different ideas to be our cover, we had to go with Belmont. And that's Belmont.
Why do you and Relax write this book?
It had to be done. And it couldn't, you know, one documentary, one book from a photographer couldn't capsulize the necessary documentation for the history of Los Angeles graffiti art. So vast that we had to propose 8 different books to really tell the story of Los Angeles.
How do you and Relax first meet?
He's an old writer from the golden era, you know, from 83 and 88.
What crew does he represent?
You know, he was an LOD, and I'm not sure what he's writing now, but back then he was from a crew that, you know, we used to, you know, see back in those days. So,
how did you and Relax imagine this book at first?
The original vision was to do 8 books. Yeah, that was the one we settled on. And 4 we're going to cover the eras, and the next 4 we're going to cover the areas. And what were the areas, Whisk? Well, Pomona to the east, Sylmar to the north, Venice to the west, and Long Beach to the south.
It's said that you had an idea for a different book, and Relax had an idea for his own book, and then you combined the two and came up with the current book.
Yeah, but we settled on 8 books, 8 volumes, and volume 1 would be 83 to 88.
What was the most difficult part of putting this book together?
you had to first you had to create a timeline of those writers based on not only your experience, not only based on Relax's experience, but all the city's experience and them mentioning people. If you read like all the different people in these books, and you're just like, wow, the first page is Green and Dream at Pan Pacific. It's incredible. This is the first page right there, just letting you know like what's cracking in this book, you know. And it's just like Ease and Kids at Pan Pacific. Those guys are legendary writers. And then, you know, you had the introductions, you had the experiences, you had writer spotlights, you had pieces, you had black books, you had artsy bus killing, you had the Radiotron, you had different articles that we found in newspapers, rest in peace, and different acknowledgments. I mean, this is one hell of a book, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
What made you and Relax push through the hard work of completing it?
It needed to be done. And again, we're the custodians, so if it was a long day's work, so be it. If it was a lot of sacrifice for our families, we just had to do it.
How long did it take to complete the first volume?
I think Relax could answer that question better.
How did you choose which writers, photos, locations, and stories would be included and left out?
No one was to be left out. It was just that we could only fit so many people, and that's why it's this thick, you know? And, you know, there were some writers that didn't want to revisit their past. They didn't want to talk about those days. Some writers opened up the tombs and just allow us to take the pictures. Some writers shut the door on us to never be contacted again. I mean, you're talking about a lot of different personalities.
Were there any writers or events left out of the book that you wish you had included?
Only the ones that didn't want to be included. Yeah.
Was there any discussion as to which author's name would go in the book first?
No.
Who came up with the name of the book?
I think we both figured that it would settle on the history of Los Angeles graffiti art, which is pretty much exactly what it is.
Why is the book titled The History of Los Angeles Graffiti Art?
Because that's exactly what it is.
Why not just The History of Los Angeles Graffiti?
Because we understood that graffiti art was the last original art form of the 20th century.
Do you remember some of the other titles you considered for the book?
No.
Both you and Relax were there during LA Graffiti's beginning. What kind of access did this give you that professors and journalists don't get?
Credibility. Trustworthiness.
Have there been any writers who didn't like their depiction in the book?
If they did, I don't remember hearing their dissatisfaction.
Most copies of this book that were in LA libraries have been stolen, and copies online are on sale for $300 to $26,000. How many copies of this book exist?
2,500, and they were at $49.99.
Wow. Will more copies ever be published?
More will be revealed.
This book focuses on Los Angeles graffiti from 1983 to 1988. Why does it focus on these 6 years?
Yeah.
What sets these years apart?
Well, 83 is as far back as we can prove. A lot of writers said, oh, I started in 81, 82, but we couldn't prove it. The first year we can prove an actual documentation was 83. And then again, we understood the eras changed. We did a full storyboard and timeline of all the different eras. It took a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
If an English teacher read this book, they might complain it has grammar, spelling, and punctuation errors. Mm-hmm. But these seem to be left in on purpose. Why do you preserve those?
Because that's just the way we did it. Yep.
Were you happy with the final outcome?
Very happy. Yeah, in fact, I wanted to make sure that we had a proper send-off to the book. I mean, you're talking about a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and sacrifice of family time to get this book done. A lot of money out of our own pockets to get this book done. So I wanted to make sure that we unveiled it somewhere proper. So I called Mocha on Grand and said, hey, we just put out a book called The History of Los Angeles Graffiti Art. I know right now we have I think you're having a showing of Style Wars, and we want to be next on the list. And they said, okay. And they said, well, when do you want to have a book signing or a unveiling, a grand opening, whatever you want to call it? And I said, the quickest time available. And they told us April of the year that the book came out. And we didn't have even one copy of the book. So we had a drop ship, I think, 250 copies from the publisher, and they sold out in less than 30 minutes.
Wow. Bestseller. There are several artists from this first era that are no longer with us. Can you talk about PJ and Rival and their contributions to Los Angeles graffiti?
I don't think in this interview I can. I think that it's just enormous. You know, every writer in this book contributed to the history of Los Angeles graffiti art. They were the pioneers. I just happened to get in on the tail end of it, you know, because I started writing in 85. You know, it was all city by 88. So.
In 2015, the History of Los Angeles Graffiti Art Volume 2 was completed and ready to be published, but it wasn't. What happened?
We didn't have the funds. You know, we wanted to continue the self-publication of the volumes. We did a Kickstarter. We didn't reach our goal to publish it, so we just kind of lost the wind in our sails at that point.
What years would have Volume 2 focused on?
89 and 94.
Why did you choose these years?
Because that's a different era.
1989 to 1994 is considered by some, as you mentioned, a renaissance or a golden age of graffiti. What made it so special?
I think that it's covering Chaka and the Heavens, which is instrumental to LA graffiti culture. And then you're diving in, unfortunately, into the Dark Ages. And then you have the Renaissance.
74 writers were interviewed for Volume 2 of your book. Who were some of these writers who stood out to you?
Anyone from 89 to 94 that made a dent, it was in this book. I still believe in my heart it will be published. More will be revealed.
Can you name some of the important crews of this era?
Sure, but it'd just take a laundry list to do it, and I don't have enough time to do it in this interview.
In 1989, Chaka had a huge impact on Los Angeles graffiti. What was his strategy that year?
You'd have to ask him.
Do you remember first meeting Chaka? Well, actually, you already mentioned it, but
I
can
did.
you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I started seeing these Chaka tags and thinking that they were pretty different. And I remember thinking that, you know, if I ever met him, that, you know, I'd take him under our wings and he'd be part of our crew. And that's exactly what happened.
What type of person was Chaka in those young days?
Oh, he was quiet. He was very alert, you know, very curious.
You mentioned he came up to you and said, Whisk. How did he know who you were?
I don't know, maybe Skep told him. Yeah.
Do you remember first seeing Chaka on the news? He had been arrested and charged. And what were your thoughts during that time? Because it was a big news story back in those days.
I wasn't a fan of that. I was pretty disappointed.
Why were you disappointed? Because he got caught or because his identity was revealed?
Yeah, I just felt like, you know, the media was going to run its course with him, and I didn't want him to have to deal with that.
You and Chaka have something in common. You were on the Michael Jackson video, and Chaka is on the Nirvana video.
Pretty cool.
Do you remember seeing that on TV? And what were your thoughts when you see this
Yeah.
young Chaka on there?
I was very happy for that. I mean, Nirvana, who doesn't like Nirvana?
As a historian, how would you describe the 3 eras that you'll be covering in your book?
There's 4 eras.
4 eras.
Yep.
How would you describe each of them?
83 and 89. 83 to 89 was instrumental to what we can prove to be the origins of graffiti art in LA, you know, and those writers that contributed to that era. And then understanding that the different era changed from 89 to 94 with introduction of Chaka, Heavens, the Dark Ages, and the Renaissance. 95 to 99, that would be all your years like after that. Who would be in that book? Just off the top of my head, Air would be in that book, Revoke, Saber. These are all their early days. You know, Zest.
Do you think we'll ever see a volume 2 published?
I do.
If you're not able to publish the 8 books you're planning, what will happen to all the historical knowledge and records you've collected?
They'll just die with us, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I really hope that we can get back on the horse and see this through.
Okay, now I'd like to talk about the origins of graffiti in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Your book says LA graffiti stems from LA gang writing and New York writers who moved to Los Angeles. Who was the first writer from New York to catch a spot in LA? Do you know?
I don't know officially. I just know some instrumental writers that landed here and made LA their home, whether they stayed here or they moved away. And those guys were, you know, pioneering and showing us a different way of striking, you know. And that's what I saw at the Boys and Girls Club, too. I heard a lot of, accent in those people that I met there, breakdancing and striking and rapping. Some sounded like they were from LA, some didn't. Maybe they were from LA, but they were mimicking New York. I mean, New York, everything starts there, right? So we had, you know, we're the originals in a lot of different things as well. You know, we got Ronflas, we got gang writing, we got gangs. I mean, we had our own different style and stuff, you know. But I think that, like, most people in this book would say that maybe the West Coast artists adopted more of that New York, quote unquote, New York style graffiti art, you know, and made it our own. Where maybe as K2S continued with their, you know, block style and their color coordination, I think both just knocked it out of the park.
In other interviews, people have mentioned Owski as being the first one from New York to write in LA and bring that style of graffiti.
I think he was among it.
Others say it's Soon.
Yep.
Is there a definitive answer that everyone agrees upon?
I don't think you can answer that definitively. It was all of them.
This leads us to our next question. Who were the first LA gang writers to transition to graffiti? Would you know? Would you name a couple?
That would have to be in the 60s and 70s. I remember walking home one day in Highland Park and seeing the local neighborhood there writing on a wall, and them doing like a skeleton kind of guy with a hat and gang writing, and I grew up to remember that was Chaz.
Chaz Bjorquez?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Another well-known legend from Los Angeles.
Yeah. And I remember telling him that story. Do you remember this little kid with long red hair? You know, the little surfer-looking guy tripping on you guys? And he said he didn't remember, but he remembered the spot that I described.
In your opinion, or from your research, what was the first crew in Los Angeles history?
Crew. I mean, I think that could be debated.
Would you say LA Bomb Squad? No?
I think they were among the first, yeah. I think Shake City Rockers were among the first. I think there's a bunch of crews that were amongst the first.
What part of the city were those crews from?
I think Shake City was more like in the Crenshaw, Baldwin Hills area, the jungles, you know. Well, I mean, that's where I interviewed their crew outside the jungles there. Yeah, and then you had LA Bomb Squad. They were from Belmont. Yeah.
What separated LA's graffiti from the gang writing and the New York style graffiti? What gave this new LA graph its own identity?
I think more of a color scheme and the style of letters that would change the definition of the graffiti.
How would all these early writers eventually meet each other? Or how did they influence each other?
We all saw each other's work. You know, we met each other at the bench or in different yards.
Several LA graffiti landmarks have been lost, but not forgotten. For those who don't know the history, what was Radiotron?
Oh man, you'd have to go into this book. Radiotron was one of a kind. I mean, you know, Carmelo Alvarez had a vision for a safe place for kids, you know, where you can do all the activities that kids were doing back then. Yeah, one of my heroes.
Where was Radiotron located, and around what year does this take place?
So it's like in the downtown area, kind of like, you know, by Alvarado, 7th Street area. The year, 86.
The name Radiotron still rings bells after all these years. It's such a great name. Do you know how that name came about?
No, but I'm sure Carmelo talks about it in the book.
Why was it important to include Radiotron in a book about LA graffiti history?
Because it made its mark in LA graffiti history.
Which graffiti writers would show up at Radiotron?
Geo, rest in peace. Prime, Deffer, Skept, various West Coast artists. Soon, Legit. Really the who's who of writers.
How did Radiotron nurture graffiti and the writers?
Well, you had a center called Radiotron that was kind of like the Hollywood Boys and Girls Club. You know, they had different, you know, elements of hip hop in one place. You know, so I think that was just a great place to be in that time.
What happened to Radiotron? Why did it eventually close?
I'm not sure. I'm sure you could read it through Carmelo's interview.
In your opinion, what effect did Radiotron's closing have on writers and the LA graph culture?
Probably just another spot that was a safe place that just went away for whatever reason.
Where did writers go after Radiotron? What took its place?
I don't remember it taking its place anywhere, but, you know, the streets is the origins, and it'll always be.
Next, there were many yards in LA where writers met up, like the Motor Yard, Pan Pacific, and the Venice Pit. But the Belmont Tunnel stands above them all. What was the Belmont Tunnel?
It was kind of a centralized location where, you know, you had the most famous battle happen there. It wasn't a safe place, that's for sure. You know, I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of people having encounters with the locals, you know. But to me, it'll always hold a special place in my heart.
Was the Belmont Tunnel a shared space for all writers, or did some treat it as their exclusive yard?
I think originally it was a shared spot, but you know, I think you knew your place whenever you went to these various yards.
What makes the Belmont Tunnel so important in LA graph history?
I think location and experience of events that were placed there.
Where was the Belmont Tunnel located?
Yeah, it's like on 3rd and Lucas, 2nd and Glendale kind of area. You had the bridge going over there. It's actually right here.
Who were some of the writers you remember seeing at the Belmont Tunnel?
Well, I mean, I did my first piece there.
Oh, wow.
Yep, in '86. Design 9 helped me with my first piece. Again, the who's who of graffiti writers, you know, we're at Belmont. I guess it was LA's version of the Hall of Fame wall. I guess that's what you can call it.
What happened to the Belmont Tunnel? What stands in its place now?
Affordable living, affordable housing. Yeah, that's what happened. I've visited there. In fact, we had a reunion. I have some great pictures of all of us on the Toluca Lake Station, kind of sitting up there. Yep.
It's been said that some of the older writers weren't that friendly to the newer generation. Why was that? Do you get that same impression?
I don't remember that. No. It shouldn't have been that way, that's for sure.
Many of LA's earliest writers wanted graffiti to be accepted and legitimized. Today, graffiti is in museums, libraries, TV shows, and many writers make a living off the art. What good has this done for graffiti?
That's a great question. I think it's to, you know, each their own opinion of it. You know, if you ask me, do you think you can make a living off graffiti art? Probably. I make my living selling solar panels and helping families make the switch to a better way.
What dangers do today's graffiti writers face that previous generations never had to consider?
You'd have to ask those guys. I mean, I have high regard and respect for anyone writing graffiti in LA.
Looking back at the different eras of graffiti, which one hit the streets the hardest?
I would say 1988. You know, it's the year that Sir and I went all city. The Dodgers won the World Series that year. The Lakers won the NBA Finals that year. I mean, what more can you ask for?
You're a major figure in graffiti history, but some of the upcoming generations might not be familiar with you. What message of yours would you like them to hear?
I want them to know that they have my support. I can totally relate to what they've been through. I've lived it myself. But I would also tell them that they have a big responsibility to uphold the image and I'd also want to make sure they understand the huge responsibility that they have to uphold the reputation of Los Angeles.
What are your thoughts on today's graffiti culture, this current era?
I love seeing graffiti, and my eyes are, you know, they stay open, so I see everyone that's doing everything that they need to be doing right now. Again, it's their responsibility to keep the torch flamed.
Are there any writers you enjoy seeing up these days? Does anyone catch your eye?
Oh, a lot of them. A lot of them from my crews. A lot of them that are not from my crews. Again, it's a laundry list of people, and they deserve the respect.
In current news, MTA and TKO announced this week they're no longer crossing each other out and working towards peace. What are your thoughts on these two legendary crews setting their differences aside after so many years?
You know, that's their own deal. I have no opinion on it.
Where do you see LA's graffiti culture going from here?
I hope to, I mean, me being a purist, I guess, I hope to see it continue the way it's been since '83.
In your personal opinion, can you name or give us your top 5 artists from Los Angeles or your Mount Rushmore of Los Angeles graffiti writers?
My Mount Rushmore. Again, it's just my opinion, but I think that Mount Rushmore would have to have 2 or 3 different sides. It can't just be 4 people.
Who would you credit for making the biggest impact and inspiring you when you were coming up and making a name for yourself?
I would say my friends. Those guys are my heroes. I call them crewmates too. But yeah, I just love them all.
What do you feel has been your biggest accomplishment in graffiti?
I would say that, whenever you hit a personal goal and you see it come to fruition, it's something to celebrate. I would say, being all city is one of them. Starting crews is another one. I'm very proud of this project here, the History of Los Angeles Graffiti Art.
Are there any regrets or wishes you would have done something different in graffiti?
No.
When it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be?
Just that I was a custodian and I did my best to be a humble servant to the sons and daughters of Los Angeles.
What does the future hold for Whisk WCA?
I feel in my heart that Volume 2 and 3 will come to fruition one day. I think that's pretty much the progression of Whisk. I've taken on a lot of other passions and done very well with those as well. So it's just, I just feel like whatever I set my mind to do, I do it. My next big thing is trimming down to about 210 pounds and being fit.
Before we finish, do you have any closing words or shout outs you'd like to give anyone?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunity and very humbled that I've been able to experience everything in LA graffiti culture and being able to see the city grow. I would say shout out to the whole fucking world, all my people, from all the different aspects of this life I enjoy, I remember thinking on the way down here, if you asked me about who to shout out and stuff, that list is just too long to do that, I do want my friends to be able to extract this shout out though and put in maybe their videos and stuff, and I would just say a huge shout out to Dead City Punks.
Definitely a legendary band coming up. Mm-hmm. Whisk, we'd like to thank you for joining us and sharing your incredible history. We look forward to the release of your book, The History of Los Angeles Graffiti Art, Volume 2. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been the LA legend himself, the one and only Whisk WCA. We'll see you next time.